Okay, so are you ready to jump into some serious myths and legends today?
Always.
Because this deep dive, we are heading straight to ancient Greece. Myths, monsters, gods, the whole shebang, but with a twist.
Right. We're not just doing the same old retellings. We've got this incredible lecture series as our guide, originally delivered in Spanish, and it is packed with insights.
Like we're talking about those hidden connections, the stuff that makes these ancient stories still relevant today.
It's about uncovering that secret language of Greek mythology and seeing how it pops up in our modern world.
Exactly. And where better to start than with death? Or should I say, the underworld?
The underworld. See, most people, when they picture the underworld, it's like, oh, dark and gloomy, right?
Yeah, kind of a bummer.
But the Greeks, they didn't see it that way at all. For them, the underworld was this incredibly detailed world. It had its own rules, its own customs, even a whole cast of characters.
Okay, so it's not just some empty void where everyone's floating around.
Not at all. Think of it more like, well, I don't know, a bustling city, but in the afterlife, right?
All right, I kind of like where this is going. So who are the major players in this underworld city?
Well, we've got Hermes, of course.
Oh, right. The messenger god?
Yeah,
Always got those winged sandals?
exactly. But down in the underworld, he takes on this whole different role.
Like what? Does he deliver afterlife takeout?
Haha. No, but he does guide the souls of the dead to their final destination.
So like a divine Uber driver.
You could say that. He makes sure everyone gets where they're supposed to go in the afterlife.
Makes sense. It's all about order, even in death.
Exactly. And speaking of order, we can't forget about Charon.
Charon. Wait, is he the ferryman?
That's the one! And he wasn't just handing out life vests either. Remember, the Greeks, they believed that you had to pay Charon to cross the river Styx.
The river Styx.
Yeah.
That's the boundary between the world of the living and the underworld, right?
Precisely. And that whole payment thing, that wasn't just to make the story more dramatic. It reflected their deeply held belief that even in death, obligations had to be met.
Wow, imagine if that was still a thing. Like, hey, family, make sure you leave some cash in my coffin, just in case.
Haha. I wonder if they left coins on the eyes of the deceased for that very reason. But let's talk about when those souls finally reached the gates of the underworld.
What, like a VIP entrance?
Well, not exactly VIP, more like beware of the dog.
Ooh, right. Cerberus.
Yes, the three-headed guard dog. He's there to make sure no one sneaks in or out.
Man, the Greeks did not mess around when it came to their underworld security. But you know what's funny? When I think of Cerberus, I keep picturing Fluffy from Harry Potter.
Right. Isn't that interesting how these ancient images, they just pop up in our modern world? It's like they never really went away.
It's true. Okay, but the underworld wasn't all doom and gloom, right? I mean, we've got to talk about the Elysian Fields.
Ah, yes, the Elysian Fields. Now we're talking paradise. This is where the virtuous souls, the heroes, they got to spend eternity.
Okay, so picture this. Instead of fire and brimstone, you've got, like, what, fields of sunflowers?
Yeah.
Ambrosia fountains?
Something like that. The Greeks, they imagined paradise as a place of peace, beauty, bliss. It's actually where we get the name for the Champs-Élysées, one of the most famous avenues in Paris.
Oh, wow, I never knew that. So the Champs-Élysées, like the Greek version of strolling through paradise.
You could say that. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another part of the underworld, the River Lethe.
The River Lethe. Okay, you're going to have to refresh my memory on that one.
The River Lethe is the river of forgetting, and it was a crucial part of the Greek concept of the afterlife.
Forgetting. Why was that so important to them?
Well, remember, the Greeks believed in reincarnation. Drinking from Lethe, it wasn't about erasing painful memories. It was about preparing the soul for rebirth.
Like wiping the slate clean, getting ready for the next chapter.
Exactly. It was all about starting fresh in a new life.
So we've got this incredibly vivid picture of the underworld. But the Greeks didn't just focus on what happens after we die, right?
Right. They were also fascinated by those who dared to challenge fate, to push the boundaries of what was possible.
Like, who are we thinking here? Give me some names.
Well, there's Prometheus, of course.
Prometheus, the guy who stole fire from the gods.
That's the one. Now, there's a figure who embodies what it means to push the limits, even if it comes with consequences.
Because let's be real, stealing fire from the gods, that's some next-level rebellion. But didn't it come with a hefty price tag?
It did. Prometheus ended up chained to a rock, an eagle eternally snacking on his liver. Not exactly a pleasant way to spend eternity. But his actions, as rebellious as they were, they sparked progress for humanity.
Okay, so it's like this double-edged sword, right? Progress often comes with sacrifice. It makes you wonder if we've learned anything from Prometheus. I mean, think about inventions like the atomic bomb. Did we really grasp the full weight of what we were unleashing? Or were we so caught up in the excitement of discovery, like Prometheus, that we didn't think about the consequences?
It's a question that still haunts us, right? How far is too far when it comes to knowledge and power?
It's like that old saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. The Greeks were really grappling with some big ideas in these myths.
They were. And they weren't afraid to explore the darker sides of human nature either. Which brings us to, well, I think we both know who's next.
Oh, you mean Mr. in love with his own reflection?
Narcissus.
Had to be a little self-centered to fall for that, right?
Well, the Greeks weren't just trying to tell a cautionary tale about vanity. They were using Narcissus to explore those dangers of self-obsession, of being so focused on yourself that you miss out on real connection.
And let's not forget Echo. Poor Echo, head over heels for Narcissus, but cursed to only repeat the words of others. Talk about feeling invisible.
It's a heartbreaking story, isn't it? And it's still so relevant today. How often do we encounter situations where people, just like Echo, are talked over, ignored, their voices silenced? The Greeks, they understood the power dynamics in those kinds of relationships.
It's like they were saying, hey, even back then, we had these same struggles with communication, with feeling heard and seen. They were dealing with some seriously complex stuff.
They were. And when it comes to complexity, you can't talk about Greek myths without mentioning Oedipus. We touched on the Oedipus complex earlier.
Right, like that whole marry your mother, kill your father thing. Intense.
To say the least.
Yeah.
But, it's not just about the shock value. The Greeks kept coming back to this story because it allowed them to delve into those deep-seated anxieties we all have. Fate, free will, those hidden desires we don't want to admit to.
It's like that feeling of no matter how much you try to control your life, fate has other plans. Kind of terrifying when you think about it.
Definitely. Oedipus, he thought he was in control, calling the shots. But the Greeks, they believed that fate always had the upper hand. And it wasn't just him, right? So many of those Greek heroes, they seemed to be wrestling with destiny.
It's like this constant push and pull between what you want and what's meant to be.
Exactly. And that tension, that struggle, it's something we can all relate to.
It's like the Greeks were asking these timeless questions. What does it mean to be human? Do we have free will? Or are we just pawns in some cosmic game?
Big questions. And they explored them through these incredible stories, through characters that have become archetypes in Western culture. I mean, think about it. We still use the names Narcissus and Oedipus to describe certain personality types, certain patterns of behavior.
It's true. They've become these shorthand ways of understanding ourselves even thousands of years later. But it's not just in psychology, right? I mean, you see Greek gods and goddesses everywhere. Art, literature, even brand names and movie titles.
It's remarkable, isn't it? These ancient figures, they've transcended their mythological origins. They're like this common language that we all share.
And I think that's because at their core, these myths, they tap into something universal, something timeless about what it means to be human. But here's a thought. If these stories are more than just entertainment, if they hold these deeper meanings, these connections to our own lives, where does that leave us today? What can we learn from them?
That's the beauty of myths, right? They're not just giving us answers, they're making us ask the questions about ourselves, the world, the big stuff.
Totally. It's like the Greeks, even with their gods and monsters, they were wrestling with the same things we are today.
Exactly. But one thing that really struck me listening to those lectures, it was the storytelling. Even when they were talking about some obscure myth, it was like you were right there living it.
Oh, absolutely. Those descriptions were so vivid. Especially the Argonauts. Everyone knows Hercules. But did you catch those details about Calais and Zeus?
The wind god sons. Yeah, those two were something else.
Imagine being on a quest with guys who could fly. Talk about a game changer.
Talk about having the ultimate tailwind. But it wasn't just about the action, right? It was those little details, the way the myths connected to their everyday lives.
Oh, totally. Like, remember that story about Hell and Phrixus? Those twins escaping on that magical ram with the golden fleece?
How could I forget? That ram was crucial to the whole plot.
Right. But then Helle falls off.
Right.
And grounds. And they named that straight after her the Hellespont.
Which we now know as the Dardanelles. It's wild.
It's like their geography was built on stories. Suddenly, maps aren't just lines, they're these epic journeys, right?
It adds a whole other dimension to exploring those ancient landscapes. Makes you want to retrace those mythical steps.
It really does. And I think that's what's so cool about these deep dives. Whether it's ancient Greece or something totally different, It's all about connecting to those bigger stories.
Absolutely. And those connections, they can teach us so much about ourselves, about the world, even help us figure out where we fit in.
I know I'm walking away from this one with a whole new perspective. It's like the Greeks gave us this incredible lens to view the human experience.
They did. They remind us that even though the world changes, people, we're not so different. We've got the same struggles, the same joys, same fears. It's all part of this bigger human story, one that's been unfolding for, well, centuries.
So next time you come across a Greek myth, don't just brush it off as like old stories. Take a second, really listen. You might be surprised what those ancient voices can teach you.
Exactly, because those myths, those echoes of the past, they're still speaking to us today.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of Greek myths. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those mythical fires burning.